Hello, and welcome back to our channel. Today, we're recanting the horrible story of the Burnley Barracks murder. But before we do that, if you haven't subscribed yet, please hit the subscribe button and the bell icon so you don't miss out on any of our future explorations. We have to step back in time to 1841, where we will explore the double murder and suicide at the former military installation at Burnley Barracks. The barracks, originally built in 1821, once hosted the thunderous echoes of 1,000 hoofbeats and the sharp commands of the red-coated British Army infantry and cavalry regiments. These ancient structures, now no longer standing, seemed to pulsate with a palpable air of dread. Yet while they stood, they harbored a sinister secret, buried deep within the cobbled stables and narrow corridors of the mess house, whose detached silhouette loomed ominously over the barrack yard. The barracks were then the stronghold of the 2nd Dragoon Guards, and the 60th Rifles, under the steely command of Major Cockburn. His iron grip was the law, his word, the doctrine, as he presided over his regiment with the force of a tempest. Within this military hive, there was a young officer, the dashing Lieutenant William Shaman O'Grady. Just 26 years old and of noble Irish blood, he bore the expectations of his late father's legacy. His lineage was a cloak, draped over his youthful shoulders. A young local woman named Isabella Turritt was a handmaiden at the barracks. Her estranged husband from the 97th Regiment had been posted abroad, and she was left to care for their child under the watchful eye of her father, who was the mess master. Her beauty, unadorned and honest, stirred the hearts of many men within the barracks, notably those of Lieutenant O'Grady and Private Robert Morris, a common mess waiter from the windswept Highlands of Scotland. Morris, a commoner caught in a whirlpool of passion and desperation, found himself besotted with Isabella. His heart ached as he watched her gradually drawn towards the charismatic O'Grady. Consumed by jealousy, he began to lose himself in the throes of his own despair. Fueled by alcohol and envy, he issued a chilling threat to Isabella. He swore that if she did not reject the lieutenant's affections, he would kill all three of them in cold blood. Fearful and desperate, Isabella sought out O'Grady and informed him of the quarrel with Morris. That evening, O'Grady went for supper in the officers' mess as usual, alongside other members of his unit, who were blissfully unaware of the tempest about to unravel. When Morris served the officers' table with O'Grady in attendance, it was very clear that Morris was out of temper, and before supper was finished, Lieutenant O'Grady had left the table early in pursuit of Private Morris. This sparked an argument between Morris and O'Grady, a confrontation that would soon turn deadly. In a shocking turn of events, Lieutenant O'Grady pointed a gun at Morris. But Morris, fueled by rage and jealousy, lunged at O'Grady with a carving knife, striking a deadly blow to the officer's side. The clamor of cheerful banter in the officers' mess was cut short as O'Grady returned, his face as white as chalk, his uniform splattered with his own blood. With a horrified gasp, he whispered of Morris's monstrous betrayal to Major Cockburn. As O'Grady collapsed, officers rushed to his side when a blood-curdling scream pierced the air. Major Cockburn went to investigate and his heart nearly stopped at the horrifying sight he met. Isabella was clinging onto life by a thread, her blood pooling around her. Morris, transformed into a monster, was brandishing a carving knife, its blade shimmering ominously in the dim candlelight. In a final act of desperation, Morris buried the blade deep into his own flesh. Isabella convulsed in unbearable agony and twice she called out for Morris, her voice barely a whisper. She surrendered to death's cold grasp 2.5 hours after the savage attack. Morris, having inflicted a fatal wound on himself, had already succumbed to his injuries. His life extinguished almost as quickly as the violent rage that had possessed him. O'Grady's pain-filled cries echoed through the night until his death at 10:30 the next morning. The sergeant major, with a grim expression, retrieved the blood-stained white-handled knife, a dreadful symbol of the night's horrifying events. Its foot-long blade was twisted, and dulled by the savage attack, a testimony to the monstrous strength that had unleashed an unimaginable reign of terror within the barracks. Isabella's remains found their final resting place at St. Peter's Church, amidst the watchful eyes of a vast assemblage of spectators. As darkness fell on that same night, Private Morris was surreptitiously interred at Holy Trinity Church, without the solace of a single prayer uttered in his memory. The ensuing Saturday, an elaborate military funeral, complete with all its regalia, was held for the late Lieutenant O'Grady at Holy Trinity Church, drawing a substantial crowd. His body was carefully placed in a sizable wooden crate and dispatched to Limerick, Ireland, to join his ancestors in the family vault. Such was the impact of this tragedy, it inspired the creation of a poignant poem. Copies of this verse, a haunting tribute to the sorrowful events, were subsequently printed and distributed far and wide across the north of England.
The Burnley Murder. You young men and maidens, one moment attend, unto a true story as ever was penned. These lines are concerning a sad tragedy, occasioned and prompted by cursed jealousy. On November the 14th, 1841, in the barracks, near Burnley, this sad deed was done. By one Robert Morris, a soldier we hear, in the 60th Rifles, which was stationed there. There was a young girl in the mess house we find, on whom this young soldier had fixed his mind. But there was another her favour had won, young Lieutenant Grady, a nobleman's son. My dear Isabella, young Morris did cry, if thus you do slight me I'm sure I shall die. So now truly promise you will be my wife, or else I'm determined to take your sweet life. Isabella and Grady in company were, when drunken Morris before them, he did appear. Inconsistent woman enraged he did cry, if we can't live together, together we must die. Then a large butcher's knife young Morris he drew, and Lieutenant Grady he stabbed through and through. Who unto the Major did stagger away, crying help, Private Morris has murdered me. Then towards Isabella the maniac did turn, with love, rage, and hatred his bosom did burn. The murderous knife he plunged into her side, have mercy, dear Morris, have mercy, she cried. She begged for mercy, but 'twas all in vain, he cut and he stabbed her again and again. Her blood ran in streams, her bright eyes lost their fire, O Morris, she cried, and did shortly expire. Meantime the alarm in the barracks was made, both officers and men ran to offer their aid. While the murderer appeared with his deed satisfied, stabbed himself to the heart, and then instantly died. Thus fell these three victims in their youth and bloom, both murderer and murdered are now in their tomb. Young people beware of a Sirs' jealousy, for that was the cause of this sad tragedy.
Thus concludes the story of an illicit love triangle that ended in blood and sorrow, permanently scarring the town and forever haunting the souls of its steadfast soldiers. Thank you for joining us on this journey back in time. If you found this video informative and enjoyable, give us a thumbs up and share it with others who might enjoy it too. Stay tuned for more fascinating historical stories, and don't forget to subscribe.